Hello and welcome to Chess with Simon. I'm Simon. Whenever we're thinking about sports, we're thinking about psychology, and that's particularly true of chess. And today we're going to have a think about tournament psychology. So when a tournament begins, all the boards are set up, everything's clean, nothing's been spoiled, everything's possible. You know, you could win everything, you could go down in flames, you could make new friends, you could see exciting things happen. It's all possible. This particular game was played in the last round. So by this time, some people have eaten too much, some people have eaten too little, maybe at strange times. Maybe some people haven't slept very well. There's a lot of nervous exhaustion, and you know, some will go home and play chess on the internet and not be able to stop, and other people will collapse in a heap. I remember not even being able to find my way home after a tournament. Anyway, so we're in that kind of state, and it's wonderful to have these experiences. The white player is Liam, who's been the captain of our first team and he joined the club when he was in short trousers, and he's seen the team come from the 4th division, the 3rd division, the 2nd division. While we're in the 2nd division, we knocked the cup holders out, the shield holders. We knocked out. Which is, it's like knocking Man United or Liverpool or Man City out of the cup. Great night. And since then, a lot of better players have joined, better than me, and the club's gone into the 1st division, top half of the 1st division. So, it's been a really nice journey. Anyway, this is a historic game of Liam's, 2013 vintage. Played at the Kidlington Chess Tournament. And Liam is playing the white pieces, and there is definitely a reasonable psychological factor to this game. So Liam plays pawn e4, which is a good way to start the game. His opponent plays pawn b6, the Owen's defence. Now this is not wrong. Named after John Owen, a vicar in the 19th century, an amateur chess player, and I think used it once to defeat Paul Morphy, the great American chess player, basically the best in the world at his time. So, immortalised for that reason, and actually a few people I know play this opening. It's an interesting opening. But if white handles it well, white should come out better. So, white plays the right move, pawn to d4. Black naturally fianchettas the bishop, attacking that pawn on e4. Which really probably needs to be defended. The right way to defend it is bishop d3, which basically allows... so bishop d3, I think, is probably the most accurate way to defend it, which means that the c-pawn, white c-pawn, can come and defend the d-pawn if required, and bishop d3 is the most popular move. Liam plays knight c3, which certainly can't be wrong. I mean, it's not a bad move. The slight risk is you're slightly more open to pins from the king's bishop in some lines, and as I say, it's blocking that c-pawn. But it's a nuance at this point. Black plays pawn e6, maybe hinting at that pin. White defends the pawn a second time, bishop d3. Now black's plays c6. Now I don't think there are any examples of this in the database. This is innovation. This is an innovative move. So you're blocking in that nice bishop. It's a little bit... There are probably better moves in the position, if we're honest. Like, my own personal favourite would be... you can play bishop b4, you can play knight f6. I imagine d5 is a better move. But anyway, I mean, when d5 is played, this will make sure the d5 pawn is well supported. White develops a king's knight. Again, pawn a6. It's a provocative move. And what's interesting is we'll actually see black strategy works, and that's what's so much fun about chess. It's not mathematics, it's a game. So black strategy works, but pawn a6, it's not obviously developing the pieces or challenging for the centre or helping the king get more safe. And actually, it's not even stopping white moving to the b5 square, because c6 is already doing that. So again, I think I'll be searching for an improvement there as black. White castles, black plays d5. Now that feels sensible, that feels good. And actually, it's sort of interesting because often, if white plays this sort of accurately, white can often get a better version of the French defence here, a better version for white, where black's a bit passive. So basically, if white's playing moves like bishop d3, pawn c3, and then after d5 he plays e5, white often gets quite a nice French. But here black's playing c5, which is thematic in the French and the Caracana moves like that, putting pressure on that d-pawn, and all of a sudden, white's got some problems. And white Makes this move, knight e2. Now you can see why one would do that, because it's sort of related to the Tarrasch. It's sort of related to similar themes in the French Tarrasch, where white manoeuvres those two knights to e2 and f3, defending the pawn, and then plays c3. But here the timing's a little bit wrong, because of course that knight on e2 is blocking the bishop. So black pushes pawn to c4, and this is a big moment really for both players, because I think as white, you know, I would be tempted to resign this game, because the bishop's trapped, so white's losing a piece, and at this level a piece is probably enough to decide the game. I would be tempted to resign the game, and as my daughter would say, go back home and watch episodes of BoJack Horseman and feel bad about myself. I mean, this is not a good moment for white. But you know, he says, right, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to fight on. I've got nothing to lose here. We're going to, you know, I'm never surrender, never ever surrender. So I'm going to move. Instead of, the computer wants to take a pawn, but we haven't followed the computer anyway so far. So why start now? Bishop f5, and we're going to try and break up the cover. We're going to go after the king. We're going to break up the cover around the black king, because if he wants that piece, he's going to have to give up a pawn. Then we're going to put the rook on an open file and attempt to get at the king. So the rook opposite the king feels like a good idea. Bishop blocks. The knight gets out of the way to allow the rook a shot and attack that pawn. Black defends the pawn, and then white just pushes on. And this looks good, right? It's just like, let's swap the pawns off, let's get at the king. Black then makes what the computer thinks is a suboptimal move. So black plays the bypass, but actually there's quite a lot of better moves in the position. So just developing the queen's knight is an example of a better move. Black bypasses, and then white starts manoeuvring around again with the knight. I mean, my guess is probably to f4 or c3, or just get that knight into a better square, because really on g3 it was going nowhere because of the g6 pawn. And black, now this I think is worth discussing. Black sort of goes for it here. I mean, maybe he just wants to get home. Maybe he's like, you know, he's like, I'm going to hammer this home. The thing is, the basic idea here is to start attacking through a pawn stub on the king's side, and that's where the king is. And white, looks like white's initiative's kind of dried up, because that white pawn and on e6 has ground to a halt. I would play it differently as black. I would sort of advise that, you know, you're a piece up. Just get the king safe. Play defensively, exchange pieces off. This is how the really top players will play it. Exchange pieces off, and it's an easy win. It's an easy win. You don't have to do all of this. I mean, look, already you've opened up that diagonal into the king. Who knows what might happen there? But, you know, if queen h5 check, it's checkmate, next move. I mean, the queen can't get to h5 because there's two knights in the way, but it's just like, why even allow any of this? Knight comes to c3. Black's just charging on, so there's no queen h5 anymore. Black's just charging on. He's basically saying, let's wipe white off the board. White plays h3. Again, you know, actually this is the computer's best move. I don't like this, because I think after g4 it's created a hook for black to start swapping off pawns, but the computer likes this. Pawn b5. The knight backs up, I think sensibly. Black puts the bishop on a lovely aggressive diagonal, and at the very least he can just start swapping pieces, so white doesn't want to swap. Black develops a knight, good idea. And then white is bringing that knight through to attack the pawn on f5 perhaps, or just to maybe try and jump into some of those holes on the king's side. I think f5 is the immediate target. Black just says, I'm having none of that, just chops it off. And exchanging pieces for black is sort of never wrong, although, you know, that queen's bishop is the moment not doing very much, so black has to be a bit careful, but exchanging pieces can't be wrong. And then the queen attacks that weak pawn on g3 right in front of the king, which white proceeds to defend. Black plays bishop c6, maybe with the idea of pawn b4, and then the knight can't go to a4, the knight has to retreat, and white's really struggling for space. And I think what black is doing here is gaining space, sometimes at the cost of creating some weak squares, but gaining space. White plays h4, which is a computer move, and again, I wouldn't have played. I mean, I just don't like creating weaknesses in front of my king, don't like moving the pawn in front of my king, but the computer likes that. And now black's playing this, and actually now we've got a weak square on f4 for the bishop, a beautiful square. Queen backs off. Black attacks that knight, as I predicted, I believe, a couple of moves ago. And this is called a Zwischenschug, isn't it? An in-between move. White says, okay, you take my knight, I'll take your queen. Or you take my bishop, I'll take your queen. Queen runs, and then the knight backs up, breaking the connection of the rooks. And again, there's a bit, you know, white worries about space, I think, here. Black's developing the rook onto a7 in sort of super grandmaster style, like you see in the Catalan, you know, the idea of it sweeping across the 7th rank. And then Liam says, right, we're going to open up a file for that rook. Given that we've broken the connection, it can't really come to the centre, we're going to take it down the flanks. And Black allows White to do that. Comes along and says, I want to get rid of this bishop on f4. I don't like this bishop, quite rightly, because Black has weak dark squares, so Black has no bishop opposing that white one. So he's right to try and swap it off. White retains it correctly. The knight's manoeuvring around again, and then White... Nice sequence of moves here where White gets that bishop to a really active square by just hitting the black major pieces. So Queen has to move, attacks the rook, can't let the bishop take the rook, that's free, that rook, it's for nothing, so Rook has to move, then attacks the Queen, and all of a sudden that bishop is on an absolutely lovely square, you know. I mean, it's possible for Black to chop it off, but, you know, Black's not playing knight d7 soon, so it'll take a little time, and if you chop it off with a rook, that's giving away material, which there's no need to do. You know, White can take the knight on e7, but I think that bishop's a monster at the moment, so yeah, I'd hang on to it. White pushes a pawn to shore up its position. Black castles now. I understand castling, and certainly it's against the rules to castle queenside because the rook's moved a lot. You could have left it in the centre. I mean, actually the engine recommends it, but you know, you got a problem here, which is that those pawns around the king are really, really airy. I mean, there's a lot of space, there's a lot of weak squares, there's a lot of ways in there. And it's often good to create some luft, as we say, some space around the king so you don't get checkmated on the back rank or something. But this is too much space, I think it's fair to say. And immediately the knight starts coming in trying to attack those weak pawns. So the pawn on f5 gets attacked, it moves forward, but White's just able to take. And now Black plays pawn f5 in the hope of just creating that wedge of pawns which will give some defence and stability to the king. But straight away White's manoeuvring. I assume the knight's heading to g3 in an attempt to attack those two weak pawns on f5 and h5. And this is quite interesting here. So I think White offers a draw here, that's my memory. And so White's offering a draw, a piece down, when everyone's tired. And I suspect Black just thought, no, I'm not having this, I'm not putting up with this, and actually this is a bit annoying. So Black slightly lashes out here, and actually this is the moment when Black's game starts to go downhill. The computer just wants to play Queen d8 and perhaps move the Queen across and defend on the king's side. Queen d8, Bishop e8, those sort of moves, just kind of defending. But Black sort of lashes out. White takes the pawn and says thank you very much. If we do a quick count up, we can see there's 7 white pawns, there are 5 black pawns. So actually White's got 2 pawns for the piece, so materially it isn't that bad for White now, and actually White has positional compensation because of the weaknesses around Black's king and all those weak pawns. Black's bishop isn't great, it's blocked in by its own pawns, and this isn't a massive improvement, frankly. Black plays pawn c3 to stop. White plays pawn c3 to stop that black pawn advancing and getting the bishop into the game. So White's sort of keeping Black bottled up here, really. The knight comes around, trying to swap off that very powerful bishop, and quite rightly so. As predicted, White's playing knight g3, and now Black's got a real struggle to hang on to the pawns here, and of course if he loses a pawn, it's material equality. So first we cut off that bishop, and then next he gets a tempo, knight c6. You know, this is good play, knight c6 hitting the rook, rook backs off, Queen comes across to defend the pawn in h5, which the knight was attacking now. That's alright, it's also defending f5, it's alright, but you don't really want your queen to be tied up defending a pawn that the knight's attacking, because that means that in other parts of the board there's going to be problems, because the queen should have bigger jobs, bigger work to do than that. White starts manoeuvring with his queen, so firstly attacking the pawn on d5, which Black defends, and now attacking the pawn on f5, attacked twice and defended once. Again, Black defends this, but you can see now White's just picking up initiative, you know, attacking the pawn again, and it's an initiative that Black really is struggling to deal with. So Black lets that pawn go. I think that was probably, there were better moves there, but Black lets the pawn go. So White's taken on f5 and now has another pawn. So now we are 7 pawns to 4 and we have material equality, but also the threats around Black's king are really significant. Black's king is not particularly safe, and you know, immediately rook g5 looks very tempting. You know, there's no bishop or knight can cover g5 square. Here, Black plays what looks like a very good move. Certainly on first glance, a very good move. So attacking that rook twice, but also the rook's pinned against the queen. So if the rook moves away, the bishop can take the queen. And actually, White doesn't even get the bishop because the bishop will be attacking the queen twice because it's backed up by Black's bishop is backed up by Black's queen. This looks like an absolute killer. Unfortunately for Black, White has a killer to play in response. This is the only move that saves the game and wins the game, but rook g5, as we said, that was an inviting square, and all of a sudden now, this is really irritating for Black, the bishop's pinned against the king. So that bishop can't move, can't take the queen because it's pinned against the king, and also it's attacked twice by the rook and the queen. So all of a sudden the crisis passes from White to Black, and now Black's got a crisis. Tries to break the pin with the rook, which is sensible, I mean logical. And then so now White stops that bishop attacking the queen, and that pawn is defended twice by rook and queen, and only attacked twice by bishop and queen. So now Black's faced with the choice of either losing a piece, giving the piece back, but remember White's got more pawns, so either giving the piece back or running away. He chooses to run away. I don't know if you saw, he probably didn't see, that White has an absolutely stunning move, and you don't get many of these moves in a chess game or even in a chess career. Rook a7 is an absolute ripper. So that's a double pin. So the rook on g7 is pinned against the king. It can't take the a7 rook. And it's pinned against the queen. If it takes on g5, White takes the queen, and then if Black takes back, then White then takes the rook on g5 with the pawn, so winning a whole queen. So this is catastrophic for Black. It's so annoying. It's catastrophic for Black. I think he makes the best move in the position. Well, actually, the best move mathematically is to take the rook on g5, but it's giving up the queen. I mean, to be honest with you, there are no good options here for Black. But although we'll see later on, he still comes up with some tricks, actually, and they're pretty serious tricks. Bishop g6. So White then swaps on g7, then pins the queen to the king. This really looks like the end of days. I mean, if I was Black, I would consider this the end of days. But Black pushes the pawn, and actually there's some method in this. There's some thinking going on here, because Black's going to create a mating net quite quickly around White's king. So White adds insult to injury. Not only has he pinned the queen, he's now attacked the queen with a pawn. And Black says, all right, fine, go ahead, take my queen for nothing. Take a whole queen, because if White were to take, I mean, players might want to have a quick think and look at this. What if White takes the queen with the pawn on g7? And the answer is Black has a check on a1, and it's checkmate. The king can't move because the pawn's covering f2 and h2, and the queen can't go in the way because the rook will just take it off. There are no the back rank's completely weak. So actually, taking with a pawn would be catastrophic, and it's easily done, this kind of thing, after we're all tired. And good on Black for giving it a shot. White takes with a rook, which is check, which just gives that extra tempo. Black runs away again, and again here. If White plays Queen h7, threatening mate next move with Queen h8, Black then has mate. So Queen h7, Rook a1, checkmate. So again, there are traps in the position, but Liam, in fine style, sacrifices a rook. Rook g8. The only legal move is to take it. Queen g6 check, king moves, and now it is forced checkmate. So the king can go in the corner, queen g7 mates, or the king can go to f8, queen g7, king e8, queen e7 checkmate. And at that point, I mean, Liam's opponent rightly realises that Liam's going to see this and goes home and has a well-earned rest. So I really enjoyed this game. Lots of colour, lots of ideas, lots of sort of creative play. In the end, Liam came through, but I think both players should be proud of this. And I've really enjoyed analysing it. If you liked this, if you enjoyed this, please like the video. And if you'd like to see more, please subscribe. We'll be sending you more in the future. I had some complaints on the last video that Chewy wasn't in the video. He's actually just lying on the ground down there, just sort of hanging out. So he's near, but he's not fully visible. Anyway, thanks for watching this, and hopefully see you all again soon. Bye-bye.